Is the Phenom 2 X6 1045T still good in 2018? Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to find that out today. Now, it has been quite a bit of time since the last video, but worry not, many more are coming. So, let's go and go over the games today. We have Rainbow Six Siege, Battlefield 1, Pubg, and Fortnite. No Blackout though, that's coming in the future videos. Alright, anyways, let's go and start off with our first game today, and that is of course Siege. So how will the Siege play? Well, compared to all my other videos, it runs perfectly well. Wait, you're supposed to answer that at the end. Anyways, yeah, it's running very well. So, starting off with the 720p settings, because when you're benchmarking your CPU, and might as well go 720p, because everyone plays in 720p apparently. Why not? Anyways, so at the lowest settings, we got about 146 FPS, whereas our comparison CPU today, the R7 2700X, got about double the FPS, but I mean 146 is still highly playable, and if you're wondering what GPU is being used, well, it's an RX 580. Why is not an RTX 2080 Ti? Because they're expensive, and that might be coming in the long-term future. Anyways, at 1080p low, the FPS was right about the same. It seems to be capped around there. As you can see with the R7 2700X, the RX 580 is able to output about 176 FPS in this scenario, whereas it is being pretty limited by that. Anyways, moving on to ultra settings, you're going to see about 116 FPS with the RX 580, and that is still highly playable. As you can see, the CPU can still do pretty well in a game like Siege. In fact, if you have a good GPU and you don't have a high hertz monitor or pretty much a high hertz monitor, I mean, you're basically going to be fine when it comes to the CPU in a title such as Siege. Not the most CPU intensive title, but a very modern and very popular one. Anyways, let's go ahead and bring on the R7 2700X. How well did it perform? Well, just a tiny bit better. There is very little difference because at this point, it's our GPU that's holding us back, not the CPU. So it is a welcome change to finally see the Phenom doing almost as good as a modern CPU. And yeah, I mean, it's very viable. You could get away with it. Can you play it in a more CPU intensive game? Well, we got a few games coming up, boys. So, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next game. And that, my friends, will be Battlefield 1. Not Battlefield 5, it's not out yet. But anyways, in Battlefield 1, how well did it perform? Well, first off, at 720p, once more, if you're benchmarking your CPU, you gotta do that for some reason. Well, there's a good reason why. It's so you check out your CPU bottleneck, not your GPU. But yeah, that's the reason. There you go. Okay, so how well did it perform? Well, we can't even cross 60, and that's not a good sign going forward. Whereas with the R7 2700X, that's very, very doable and very easy. In fact, the 580 should be doing very well at this resolution, but it can't because it's holding back. And if you're wondering what the clock speed of the 1045T is, well, it's about 2.7 gigahertz. So, no, these can be clocked a bit higher, as I will show at the end of the video. But anyways, at 1080p ultra settings, once more, as you can see, we are held back heavily by the CPU. We're only at about 58 FPS, and unless you may bump up the clock a little more, you're basically going to be limited to about a below 60 average, which is pretty bad. And I mean, there is 6 cores, which Battlefield 1 can leverage, but sadly that clock speed and just the old architecture cannot make up, even with all those cores running at 100%. It just can't, boys. And moving on to our third game today, ladies and gentlemen, we have PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. So, how well did it perform? Well, if you ever played Pubg before, you know it doesn't perform that well on most hardware, and the Phenom is no exception to that. In fact, we're getting about 45 FPS. Is it smooth? No. But is it playable? I would say so. So, the 1% and 0.1% were pretty bad also, so, that's gonna hurt you a bit. But, I'm pretty sure some people play this on a potato computer with 20 FPS. So yeah, you can definitely get away with it. Now, I mean, the big thing is it's not only the CPU being bad, it's also, well, I wouldn't say the CPU's bad, it's just a bit old. It's also Pubg is not exactly the best game when it comes to taking advantage of your hardware, as the graphics aren't that great, and compared to most Battle Royale games, it runs pretty bad. But, as a comparison, once again we have a common trend, where the R7 2700X is able to get double the FPS with the RX 580. Now, as you can see, that is the beauty of a new architecture, higher clock speed, and more cores. And more things, more gigahertzes. There we go. So yeah, I mean, if you're still in the market for one of these things and you're looking for a budget rig, you could definitely do it. You're gonna be holding back most GPUs, but hey, if you want to try and get a black edition, overclock it pretty well, I'm guessing you could do pretty good. And in fact, hopefully in 2019, I can go ahead and include a 1100T with a black edition. That hopefully is coming pretty soon, along with a bunch of other CPUs that will be benchmarked pretty soon, including a Core 2 Extreme. That's going to be pretty fun, and those videos are coming shortly. Unless I take another 2-month break, but who knows? It all depends on schoolwork and everything else goes. So, once again here at the high settings, we see about the same FPS because the GPU is being held back, while the R7 2700X has a massive difference, almost doubling of the FPS, which is going to give you a much smoother gameplay. So let's go ahead and move on to our fourth game today, and that is Fortnite. Now, you might have noticed that I've only included 4 games, and sadly I have, but rest not, because following all future videos, I will be including a variety of games, including RPGs, RTS, and all that other stuff. This is the last one to include just pure FPS games and Battle Royale games. So that is improvement that I want to do, and one that I think is going to be very welcome. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the game. How well did it perform? Well, Fortnite runs very well. As I found with many different GPUs and CPUs, it's a game that's easy to run, which is good, because it's popular, and I'm pretty sure everyone that's playing this, if you're not playing on a console and you're trying to play on PC, well, you can get away with it with pretty much a wide variety of hardware, which is always nice to see a game that does that. Pubg, not so much. Fortnite, I mean, even if you don't like Fortnite, you gotta give it credit for running pretty well. So, at the epic settings, the RX 580 is once again pretty bottlenecked, as we're only getting about 67.6 FPS and an absolutely abysmal 0.1 percentage. You know what, let's just keep going. So, yeah, it's definitely showing that you can't play, but still, being able to pretty much play a game maxed out, even though it's not the smoothest experience, because as you can see, the 1%, 0.1% is still a pretty impressive thing on a CPU as old as the Phenom, and as low clocked as this version of it is. So, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, is my cat snoring? I think that's my cat snoring in the background. Hold on a second. Kitty cat, you okay? Yeah, she's okay. She snores pretty loud when she's near me. Kind of sad. She's getting old too, but you know, that's life. That's how everything gets. Like a CPU. CPUs also age. But as you can see, as we get the settings higher, we can see that the RX 580, even though it is being bottlenecked, is not showing as much of a difference when it comes to the frame rate as you bump up the settings, and eventually at some point, fun little fact, you will start having your GPU be the bottleneck, where your CPU is no longer holding it back, it's your GPU. That can be very bad, however, if you have a high hertz monitor, or if you can't achieve 60 in the first place, or a very smooth 1%, 0.1%. But otherwise, I mean, hey, it is still a playable game, and ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a massive variety of games coming forward. We are going to go ahead and pop in some new games in the Battle Royale section, such as Blackout. We are going to go ahead and move on to some RPGs. The Witcher 3, or possibly another RPG, will be. Ooh, okay, that will be a great replacement, actually. And, whew, let's go ahead and move on to our last section today, and that is the Overclock section. So, first things first, it is not a black edition, which means I had to overclock using the front side bus, and well, I tried to go for a conservative overclock, and the CPU was annoying. It required a lot of voltage to even get this in the first place, but the overclock didn't produce exactly the best results, and I'm guessing if I had a black edition at 4 GHz, it'd be much more noticeable. And also, one last thing, as the improvement to the variety of games is going to improve, we're also going to be improving the overclock section. There's going to be much more detail in the overclock section, and it's going to be lengthened, because I like keeping it small, but I feel like we need a little bit more. So, anyways, in the conclusion, how well is it? Is it good in 2018? Is it viable? Well, I would say so. For a budget rig, it's still viable, and if you're still holding on upgrading your hardware, or just don't have the cash to upgrade, which plenty of people don't, then yeah, you can get away with pretty much playing anything. Are you going to have the best experience possible? No. But is it still doable? Is it still a CPU that was worth the money back then? Yeah, I guess so. Can you go ahead and leave this thing on for another few years? Well, who knows? Maybe we'll do an update video in 2030. At that point, it probably won't be any good. And we'll probably also have, like, hexadeca cores. I don't even know, dude. We're gonna have a lot of cool stuff back then. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you have liked the video, go ahead and leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you haven't done any of that, well, that's alright. You can do whatever you want. That's life. See ya.